Thank you. I've been working on a project that helps us to better understand the students' experiences with VR, and specifically in the classroom context. So in order for us to better understand the learning experiences, we've tried to focus our studies on using virtual reality in a higher education context because this type of technology is inherently potentially engaging with our students. It's immersive. It's an informative experience for them. And more specifically, we wanted to explore how, when presented in VR, how a virtual environment can provide three-dimensional visual simulations that can be used to inform students about a very specific learning context, which was geomorphology. So I'm calling this a formative study. We're not necessarily sure where we're going to go with it next, but we do know that we're going to use this in a user-centered design context for our later project. So we're focusing on the experiential effects of VR on a specific cohort of physical geography students. And these guys are learning about real-world examples of geomorphological phenomenon. And it's anticipated that this will help the larger Building City Dashboards project to gain some insight into student experiences with this technology in explorative educational contexts. And these can also be hopefully used in other cross-reality contexts as well. So we're also exploring augmented reality as well. But I think we touched on that this morning, where it's a case of horses for courses. We use AR for certain classroom topics and virtual reality for others. And by observing a very specific user group, we're trying to visualize the students' attitudes and their behaviors towards this technology, and which we hope, like I said, we can use this in the future to inform our software development team in a user-centered design process. So in theory, the advantages of training in VR are that the virtual environment can facilitate the users in the construction of a context dependent memory. So by using a virtual environment, we can take advantage of the students' memories of real-world occurrences to stimulate them in learning new things and the outcomes that they develop in the virtual world. So this has been theoretically explored in the likes of sense-making and knowledge-seeking theories. Now, we're trying to steer clear of the pedagogical theories behind it and concentrate on the experiential in our study. But we've been looking at previous research, such as medical simulations and aviation training that have a long history of use, case scenarios recorded in literature. However, when we've looked at literature specifically involving multimedia in the classroom, we've been reading mixed results. So we don't necessarily know if learning experiences are, learning outcomes are enhanced by technology, but we're interested in the experience anyway. We can come to the specific use cases afterwards. So to explore how virtual environments might be influential, we looked to Stuart and Thomas to give us a couple of use cases that we know have been tried and tested in the past. And this is going to help us to explore the use of VR technology to facilitate the students in the exploration of existing places, such as uninhabitable and far-off distant locations, as well as providing a platform for exploring real-world objects, such as glaciation, river deltas, sea stacks, and the likes. So to do this, we explored lots of different education-focused softwares. And we know that they are often created to increase the students' motivation and engagement with their learning materials. But we wanted to provide our software developers with a contextually aware perspective of the overall experiences of the students using the technology. So we used an existing questionnaire, the UEQ. I've used it before, and we're looking at exploring virtual reality experiences to answer some of these questions on the side there. So for our experiment, we took students from the Department of Geography and asked them to come to a VR workshop. And these students were already familiar with geomorphological concepts. They'd already completed lectures on these topics. And each session was run with 3 to 4 different students. And they were given about 40 minutes in groups to explore this. So the students were placed in VR one at a time, but they were observing the person in VR on a large screen as well. So the students could interact with each other. The student in VR didn't have their headphones on, and they could talk across the room to the guys who were in the group with them. So they could then be directed to a geographic location in the world of Google Earth VR. And the lecturer had chosen locations that the students would be familiar with the landscapes already, having looked at their previous slides in the classroom. And basically, the student would go to a geographic location, say a glacier in Iceland, and they would be able to explore around the glacier from multiple angles. The lecturer would ask them questions on what they were looking at, and they could basically float around and build upon their existing knowledges. So in the end, like I said, this is formative for us, so 25 students is enough for me to gain enough information to explore trends. If we wanted to dig any deeper, we would obviously need a lot more participants. This is reflective of an average class in Maynooth University. There are more female to male ratios. The age range is 18 to 24, usually in all of our classes. Everybody has an EFQ level 4 or equivalent qualification, and they were all into the second year of their geography degrees. Some of them were part-time. This is kind of stuff that is just there to describe our participant pool as opposed to looking for statistical significance between these types of indicators. What we were interested in was how they identified as user types. So we had the students identify themselves as technology users on 2 continuous scales from low to high. This segmented our user groups into 4 distinct areas. This is quite similar to the user cube approach. I'll come back to this in a bit. We used the UEQ to capture students' immediate impressions post-task, scales from -3 extremely bad to +3 extremely good. And then this can be further broken down then to focus on students' experiences of the attractiveness of the technology, perspicuity, efficiency of use, dependability, stimulation, and novelty. We also captured observational data during the session to create an empathy map, which is a user experience mapping process to summarize our user attitudes and behaviors. So how did that all come out? So the user groups, they identified themselves as novices mainly in the simple casual box, and as a secondary end user, which is typical for us because students have a lot of domain knowledge built up through their experiences, and they haven't got a lot of experience. Whereas people who might have a casual gaming experience, casual gaming domain knowledge, they may have complex experiences of the technology. So we found that this actually fills in a space for us as the Building City Dashboards group, because we want to look at secondary end users for our data studies. From exploring the UEQ, the students considered the attractiveness, the pragmatic and hedonistic quality aspects positively. These are evaluations of the VR technology as a knowledge building and sense making of their geomorphological principles from the classroom. So the context is really important here, that they all enjoyed using the technology, and that the use, the practicality and the functionality of virtual reality in this context, at a very basic level, could achieve its intended goals. That all of the qualities scored high. So these overall scores indicate that the students were enthusiastic and that they enjoyed their learning experiences with the technology. So this can be broken down further to look at the purpose of using VR in the classroom. And that was pretty clear from the results, that the students knew how to use the technology and they could do it efficiently. And this shows how the cognitive resources that were expended by the students, the students felt that they were all well achieved in their tasks. And to support this further, the perspicuity, the transparency of the interaction was rated pretty high. They understood how to use the Google Earth VR interface, and the navigation methodologies pretty straightforward. And that the dependability of the technology was rated highly. There is a question raised there in dependability that might relate to the students' experiences. They're all quite simple, so there was a little bit of variation in the results there. So things then relating to the hedonistic, the emotional side of things. The students' rating of stimulation. So the average rating was quite high there, and this means that the technology supports the students' need for innovative and interesting functions. The interactions and the stimulating content of the classroom was there for them, and the students' positive evaluation of novelty also represents how innovative the VR experience was perceived to be by them. Now, things like novelty ratings, we've talked about this briefly, but the novelty is something that can change over time, obviously, so other hedonistic qualities will come to head, such as PowerPoint slides in the classroom. Those are things that we're well versed in. And like I said, the rating of dependability, we found that the alpha coefficient was pretty low for dependability. That meant that there was some disagreement in the results. So the empathy map then served us, by bringing it all together, to support the user experience questionnaire. So the students were observed very through like a mirrored glass kind of situation, that they were okay with. We got full ethical consent for observations and all of that. But it can be used then to communicate to our software team that the more qualitative side of what the students said, thought, did, and what they felt during the experiment. And although some confusion was expressed during the experiment, during the workshop, the overall positive responses regarding stimulation supports our previous research that compares VR learning tools to other pedagogical learning tools as well, hopefully. So I'm going to actually wrap it up, I think, very quickly. Just to say that, okay, although we only covered 2 of the potential 8 roles of using VR in the classroom, we did gain some insight into the experiences of the students and the technology that they were using. And we also were successful in measuring the students' experiences and attitudes towards the use of virtual reality technology. And it's in a very specific context with a very small user group. We're not elaborating any further than that. Definitely more lines of questioning can be explored than this, but I think as a formative study, it kicks off on the right foot. We're working on a paper on this, and that's just coming together at the moment. But there are other members of the team involved in that. If you have any questions, you can email me about my side of things from a HTI perspective, but the other team members bring their skills as well. Okay, wrap that up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Very interesting. Any questions?
Yeah, sorry if I rushed through it.
Thank you very much, Gareth. With the user types charts, was the data from the UEQ, or was that a separate survey?
So that was a separate survey. That's a separate questionnaire. It's 2 questions on a continuous scale from low to high, 0 to 100. And the 2 ends of the scale are casual to advanced for domain knowledge and simple to complex for their experiences. And we've used that before in our other studies, and it's relatively effective in
Is that something you would develop internally, or is that based on a framework?
It's based on the UserCube framework, UserCube, but it's a 2-dimensional version of that. On the other dimension, we were working with familiarity with technology in general. So were any member of the cohort not to be technically savvy enough to add comment, we could remove them from the study. But we found that actually excludes a lot of very interesting, rich data. So we've cut it down to 2 dimensions. Empathy maps, yeah. That's what they were saying, yeah, those are direct quotes. So yeah, so the question was about what the student says, and the orange post-it notes there are should be in quotation marks, because that's what they said during the session. I might add that some of those are colloquialisms. The students were in no way in a deadly situation. Yeah, deadly is a good thing in Ireland.
Right. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.